The Project. Kuwait. Learn. Live.
What are electromagnetic frequencies?
First of all, the Earth has its own electromagnetic field. It's called the Schumann resonance. It resonates at about 7.3 hertz, give or take. So what we're talking about in my line of work is what we call non-native EMFs. So all of these electrical fields that are man-made and that the human body has not evolved with.
There is a device where you can detect EMF signals within your home.
One is called a tri-field meter and one is called a coronet meter. Those are two different brands. You can get them for about $170.
Good.
Now I'm thinking like people safety, like I need to educate them. I'm like, oh my God, you know what you're being exposed to, like take care of yourself.
When my sleep got so severe and I started blocking blue lights, it was the beginning of my recovery from decades-long bout with insomnia.
That's a really good point. We had to have rules. I mean, in Kuwait, it's like off the charts, the addiction to phones.
Electromagnetic frequency. Say that 5 times fast, Meg.
That's amazing.
All this and more in today's episode.
Cathy, welcome to the show. I think you could probably give a better introduction for yourself and what your background is, especially when it comes to electromagnetic frequency. Say that 5 times fast, Meg.
That's amazing.
I am a holistic nutritionist and a certified building biology environmental consultant and electromagnetic radiation specialist. I am basically helping people in all areas of their health, but I became a building biologist to look at the environmental impact that so many people are not addressing. So we can do everything right. Our diet's awesome. Our exercise routine is amazing. Our mental health is great. But if we're not addressing our environment, it's a very, very big piece in people's health and performance. Yeah, so that's what I do, helping people in all of those areas with their health.
It's been a huge piece. I know for me, working with clients is trying to get them to understand that as well. It's the load that you're under in that environment being the huge part of what's going to shape you. I think that's something that we all kind of take for granted. How your environment, what stress loads are coming at you and things that are hard to control, water and air quality and things. That's not something that you can change in the moment, but what are some things in your environment that you do have some control over or to be aware of at least?
Yeah. So as a building biologist, I look at both air quality and that would include water as well. And it seems like that's not something that we can tackle, but the indoor air inside your home is always dirtier, always more toxic than the outside air. So yeah, I mean, we think, cars are driving by and there's exhaust, but when we bring products into our home, by and large, they're petroleum-based products or they're chemical-based products. So carpet, our furniture, particle board and our building materials, even like our drywall, paint. I mean, all of this stuff is chemically based and it definitely impacts the air quality in a really, really big way. So there is a lot of things that you can do. One is being aware of the items that you're purchasing. If you can buy a solid wood table versus particle board or pressed wood, or if you can have hardwood floors or cork floors versus carpet, that's really huge, actually. And then just ventilation, opening windows, having a good quality air filter, all of those things. There's a lot that we can do that we're not considering. But then the EMF piece, of course, is huge. So many things that we can do to reduce our exposure. And what I hear so many times from people when we're talking about this is they say, well, it's everywhere. Pull up my computer and I'm getting 30 Wi-Fi signals, so why even bother? And we can get into, the fact that that's actually not really indicative of the impact that you're getting. The sensor in your computer is amplifying the reading that you're getting. It's not actually you're getting that much exposure as you think. So starting in your home environment is really, really important because with a lot of this, it's the proximity. The closer you are to the device, the exponentially larger exposure you're getting. So there's a lot you can do in your.
What are electromagnetic frequencies? Like, it's obviously like a frequency, but like, how can you describe it to someone like myself that has absolutely no clue? I just think of squiggly lines hitting me in the head.
Yeah, sure. Well, honestly, that's kind of a good way to visualize it. So electromagnetic fields, well, first of all, the Earth has its own electromagnetic field. It's called the Schumann resonance. It resonates at about 7.3 hertz, give or take. So it's basically, when we think of the poles, the North and the South Pole, they're magnetic. So the Earth has this own magnetism. And when you think about the body has its own electromagnetic field. So the body communicates via electricity. Somebody is in cardiac arrest or they have a flatlined, the paramedics or anybody who's doing CPR on this person might use a defibrillator to send electricity through the heart to get the heart going again. So our body uses electricity, and this is an electromagnetic field. Essentially, EMFs are light. It's all on the light spectrum. So the sun has its own EMF. The light is an electromagnetic frequency. So what we're talking about in my line of work is what we call non-native EMFs. So all of these electrical fields that are man-made and that the human body has not evolved with. So if we're in connection with the Earth's own magnetic field, that's great. There's a lot of anti-inflammatory effects from that. Really, really generating for our nervous system. But that's
getting in touch with that. Sorry, that's like, barefoot outside or
exactly.
That's like kind of the ones I've heard of. Are there any other techniques, I suppose, to get in touch with that?
Earthing, grounding. No, not really.
Not really.
Okay. I mean, you just have to be barefoot on the ground. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So we evolved with that. And that's what our body understands that frequency, and it is very good for us. When we introduce all of these non-native frequencies, and we're talking about radio frequencies from things like Wi-Fi and cell phones and Bluetooth, but we're also talking about electrical wiring in our homes, magnetic fields, high tension power lines, these kinds of things that give off these man-made EMFs that our body does not know what to do with because it's a new piece of communication that we don't understand. And some of the criticism I get is, well, this stuff has been around for 100 years. And so, people aren't dying from it. And I'm saying exactly my point. This has only been around for 100 years versus how many, millions of years of human evolution. This is brand new to us. And I would argue that the health of people in industrialized places, the health of us over the last 100 years is declined considerably, not just because of this, topic, but it's not helping us, put it that way.
So I have a quick question. Now, I've heard this on other shows and I've read articles about it, that there is a device where you can detect EMF signals within your home, correct?
Correct.
And is it accurate? What is it called? For most of the listeners, we don't have it in Kuwait. I guarantee that. So at least they could probably get one on Amazon or something.
Sure. Yeah. Well, they're just basically EMF meters. And they're small meters, and they range from $100. And then, the meters that I use when I'm assessing a person's home are several $1,000s a piece. And I have 4 different meters. So if you wanted to get just a meter, you can get them on Amazon. The ones I recommend are, one is called a tri-field meter and one is called a Coronet meter. Those are 2 different brands. You can get them for about $170, and it will tell you how much radio frequency you have from our wireless devices, the magnetic fields that come off our wiring, and electric fields that come off our wiring. And I think that's a great investment for people to put their money towards so that you can just get a sense of what's going on in my environment and can I reduce this?
Who's at risk the most of it affecting then?
Yeah, well, that's a really excellent question. And my instinct when people ask me this is typically say children, of course, because, their skulls are still developing. There's more access to the brain from these EMFs. Children, elderly, and people who have chronic health conditions. However, that doesn't always line up with the people that I see. So I'm working with clients who contact me because they're extremely electrically sensitive and they don't fit that model. I did an assessment last week on a guy's home who's a local contractor here, has his own business building homes. He's a big, burly, 200-something pound guy. He's doing CrossFit, he's exercising, but just one day he was using his phone and just one day it just triggered him. And he can't use his phone anymore because he gets severe headaches when he puts his cell phone to his head.
Interesting.
And where did this come from? He doesn't have any chronic health conditions. He's very, very healthy. And I see that quite a bit. So while I feel like the chronically challenged are a little bit more at risk, it's affecting everybody across the board. And so I don't really see that there's a really clear answer to that because I'm seeing it affect everybody.
Have you seen more effects after they introduced 4G and 5G?
Yes, 4G for sure. So 5G is a little bit tricky. So here in Idaho, it's rolled out a little bit, and Boise, where I'm at, we've got maybe 100 5G small cells within, 20 miles or so. So it's still kind of sparse. So the jury's still out on that because a lot of us aren't getting that exposure. But with 4G, absolutely, a huge increase.
What was that like? I guess what were the tip-offs of noticing like when that happened, or what was it? Just like symptoms that people are talking about with use of their devices,
right?
Or?
Yeah, exactly. The symptoms, symptomology, and awareness, because people are starting to associate their symptomology with their devices. And I think the thing with the 4G is that was kind of the advent of smartphones. Mm-hmm. And part of the issue there is when we had just flip phones and we could only text, we weren't looking at our phone 24 hours a day. And people have it in their pocket. I have a client that sleeps with it under their pillow. I mean, that's so common. Or they charge it right next to them. I mean, it's on your person pretty much all the time.
I'm guilty of charging it right next to me. How bad is that?
Yeah.
Am I going to grow another head or something?
Yes.
Like, I've gotten really good. I used to be that person where it would sleep probably, right on the bed with me. But now I don't even have it in the same room. It's out of my bedroom.
Yeah, I recommend, there's 2 ways you can do it. Put it in another room, or you can keep it in airplane mode with Wi-Fi off and Bluetooth off, and that's going to dramatically decrease it. But it's surprising how much electric field you will get from that cord. I just posted a video on YouTube about showing my meter when I was testing just a phone charging cord that was next to the bed, and it increased it. I mean, I was getting like 80 volts per meter, which you don't really need to know what that means, but we want that number to be under 0.3, actually 160 times higher than what we want.
Wow.
So just move it.
That's while it's charging a phone, or that's just while it's there?
Just while it's there. The phone doesn't even have to be plugged in.
Wow.
If it's plugged into the wall, that cord is giving off a really high field.
Wow.
I know. It's crazy.
I'm like looking at all my cords right now.
Right. Yeah.
Like I want to rip them all out.
I know. Right?
Something we never think of.
I'm looking at my podcast room and I'm like, oh my God.
It's all wires.
So now looking at that, and I just finished building my home and we're actually moving too. And I didn't know any of this. So what are some of the things that I could do now to kind of offset whatever damaging EMF signals are within the house from the wiring, from whatever? Are you kind of screwed, at the end of the day, or is there a way out of it in a cheap manner?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot you can, if you were building a new house, you would have a great opportunity to actually piece of metal, and that actually stops the electric fields and the dirty electricity almost completely, which is amazing. And people can do that in their homes. But if, like most of us, if we don't have that luxury, distance is key here. So there's something called the inverse square law, which means that the distance that we are from the device, the power density of that drops off dramatically. So what I do, my bed is actually like 2 feet from the wall. It's a little annoying, but it's so dramatically less when I have just that much distance versus my head right against the wall where the wires are.
Right.
So that's one thing you could do. Another is I actually turn my breaker off at night to the bedroom. So that just kills any electricity flowing to the bedroom. I don't need anything electrical in my bedroom at night when I'm sleeping. And then one of the biggest things we can do is, like with internet, Wi-Fi is relatively new. Let's say 10 years. I mean, give or take, of the fact that everybody has Wi-Fi instead of being plugged in via Ethernet.
Yeah.
And if you go to most office buildings, we still have Ethernet cords. So, I mean, I know I'm talking to you on my computer right now, so I can't show you, but I have an Ethernet cord that is plugged into my Wi-Fi router, it's not Wi-Fi. It's plugged into my modem and router, and I disabled the Wi-Fi signal. So that has brought me down, let's say, 20,000 microwatts per square meter, which the microwatts per square meter is how we measure the radio frequency, which is outrageously high, to almost zero. So I've completely eliminated it. So hardwiring is great. I realize not everybody's going to do that. And if you can't, just unplug the router when you're not using it. You don't have to have it on at night. And that's the most important. At night, when we're trying to recover, autophagy is happening, lymph drainage from the brain, we don't want these non-native EMFs interrupting those processes. So turn it off at night. You could also enclose it. So you can get like a Faraday cage. They make these mesh boxes that are metal. You can put the router
what's it
right
called
into
again? Sorry?
A Faraday cage.
Okay.
So it's just a box of either stainless steel or aluminum, and you just put the router right into that. Or you can drape it with, there's cloth that has silver woven through. And I will often do this with clients that won't get rid of the Wi-Fi. We'll just drape it in one of these cloths or put it in this metal box, and it will reduce your exposure by about 90%, and you'll still get your signal.
This is really interesting. I'm just thinking about this. I mentioned earlier that I work with Lulu, and I know that they have like on their tags of their clothes, they have like an RFID little measurement or whatever, so they can keep inventory of things. But if there's any, like some of the clothes have a silver component to it to keep it antimicrobial, so sweat doesn't, bacteria doesn't grow and it doesn't smell after you sweat. And so it's funny that RFID will not pick up those products if the silver is in front of it.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So now I'm like, oh my God, I need to buy all silver lined clothing.
right.
To protect myself.
People do.
That's interesting though. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Okay. They've always just said, if it's their static X products, that it won't pick it up on the RFID, but now it makes sense that
it blocks it.
Even thought of those things. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to like tell the whole
nice Lulu ad, Meg.
I know. I'm sorry. But now I'm thinking like people safety. Like I need to educate them on like, oh my gosh, do you know what you're being exposed to? Like take care of yourself.
Well, that's interesting that you say that about Lululemon, because I do yoga almost daily. And I used to go to studios, but it got to the point where I was like, everybody had their bags in the room with their phones in there and there was Wi-Fi. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And I'm trying to like get into my Zen place and meditate and do my yoga. And there's wicked high radio frequency in here.
That's a really good point. We had to have rules. I mean, in Kuwait, it's like off the charts, the addiction to phones.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everywhere.
That was the hardest rule to get to people when I was living there and we had started the facilities. The hardest rule was getting people to have no phones. So we would have like a basket that everybody would have to put their phones in, and we'd have to put them behind the desk and away from everybody so they couldn't grab them. But we also teach that too, like right after a workout, that next like 5 minutes or so, like right when you finish all this physical stress on you, of taking that time to like not grab your phone. And now, there's a lot of emotional stress that can come through that, of looking at what's on your phone and who needs you and things to be done and whatnot. But now even that frequency, I think interrupting, like you're talking about the recovery process. That's huge.
I have a question out of left field. Speaking of phones, Meg, what about headsets? Like I'm wicked guilty of Bluetooth earbuds. So it's like, all right, is there a safe Bluetooth earbud? Because I need my music, when I'm working out. If it's putting me at risk, then,
Yeah, there's a few components with that. And the main thing is you're putting that right next to your head, right? So
in your ear.
My wife
as
would
close
argue
to your brain as you can get.
My wife would argue I don't have brain cells anyway, so.
So how I got into building biology was that I had really severe tinnitus in my left ear for over a decade, and nothing would solve it. And so I would, lay down at night, and I had severe insomnia as well. And it would just, the ringing in my ear was just, God, I mean, it kept me up all night. It was absolutely maddening. And then when I started to research into the EMFs a little bit, I was looking into it for my sleep. I stopped using my phone for about a week to see if it impacted my sleep at all. And my tinnitus went away in like 3 days, just 100% gone.
Wow.
And I know it absolutely blew my mind. And it was that experience that I said, all right, I got to figure out what this is all about. And so I know when I've got devices to my head, I definitely get symptoms. And so there's no question that it's causing oxidative stress. When I'm talking about distance is key here, if we're putting that stuff up to our head, I'm not a fan. I mean, the point is like we have options. You can still have your music, be it wired. It's a little bit more convenient, but why risk it? I mean, we could plug it in.
That makes sense.
Listen to the music that's in the gym.
Whoa.
I know. I think we're all kind of like, no.
Yeah.
So what does it actually do to our central nervous system? Like, how does it affect our central nervous system? I work at an oil company. My day job is with an oil company. And it's funny because I just moved offices 2 weeks ago and we had this huge radio tower, literally, I'd say about 300, 400 feet away from my window. Beautiful view. And there's just this big ass radio tower, like 400 feet. And I could have sworn that was the reason why my sleep was disrupted and I just felt crummy because I'd come home on the weekends. I'd feel great by Sunday. So I really attributed it. I was attributing it to what I was exposed to, that I was exposed to something within my office that was just draining me. I mean, it just essentially felt like I'd go into work, I'd have full batteries, and then I'd be drained by the end of the day.
Well, I would say that your intuition on that one was probably right on. I mean, if it was right there, you're getting blasted a huge, huge amount of exposure. And when I said I got into this because I was trying to figure out my sleep, it was a night and day difference when I hardwired everything and got a lot more distance from all these devices. My sleep was so much better, exponentially better. So as far as the central nervous system, So what EMFs are doing to us on a cellular level, and this is primarily the work of Dr. Martin Pall that I'm going to talk about, and that's Martin Pall, Pall. He's a professor emeritus from Washington State University. And so what he has discovered is that the EMFs, the non-native EMFs, are negatively impacting our voltage-gated calcium channels. So what that means is all of our cells are kind of guarded by these voltage gates, and there should be a lot of calcium on the outside of the cell. And they will open for specific reasons, but they should primarily be closed. These gates are closed to prevent the calcium from flooding into the cell, because we need the calcium on the outside, not the inside. So when we have an exposure of these EMFs, and it doesn't take long, 10 to 30 minutes, these voltage gates will actually be open and the calcium floods into the cell. And then we get a significant amount of oxidative stress downstream from that. And so how this manifests with individual people is going to present very differently. Everyone's symptoms are going to be different, but essentially it's this overwhelming amount of oxidative stress. And, a lot of the research has been done on 30-minute, hour-long exposures, but we know now that we've got 24/7 exposure. So then, this oxidative stress will affect every part of our body. And so for the central nervous system, we know it affects our neuronal cells and cell apoptosis. And a lot of research out there showing decrease or altered TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, T3, T4. So it really disrupts your HPA axis, your HPT axis. It just affects all of our cells.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I think me and Meg had the same expression of, we're just going to take that in for a second.
I'm just looking around. I'm just like wires and cords. Oh my God.
And Meg's lucky.
Yeah.
She moved back to the States. You guys have building codes out there in Kuwait. It's kind of like a free for all. Like, we have zero building codes. We've got oil refineries.
A lot of shortcuts taken.
Yeah. We live in one of the most polluted countries in the world. I think it was ranked like 12 or 13 when I checked the rankings.
Oh my gosh.
And it's because we don't have any regulations. And, when we go to Boston, like when we go to the States for the summer, I feel great.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah,
I think it's a big part of what the country has been through as well. We had Maddie's cousin actually on a while ago, an episode about thyroid cancer. And it was interesting because there actually is an alarming rate or group of, I think, females in particular that were there during the invasion that have had issues with thyroid cancer. So it's just, what kind of things, how long does it take for something you say, relatively new, 100 years, but like how long does it take for things to start showing up?
Right. And well, that's an important point because like not everybody's going to have these symptoms, not obvious symptoms like I did, like my tinnitus and my sleep. I know if I've been in a high EMF environment all day, I know because my ear will start ringing and I'm like, oh, there's my cue. But so many people are like, well, I feel perfectly fine. So I don't need to worry about it. And well, I think it's great that you don't have symptoms. I wish I didn't have symptoms, but what's the long-term risk? Are we going to start to have autoimmune issues? Are we going to start to have thyroid issues? Are we going to start to have cancers or, whatever it is? So, yeah. And some people will live their whole life and they'll use Bluetooth every day and they'll use Wi-Fi every day in their phones and be perfectly fine and not have any symptoms or health problems.
Right.
And they're, just like somebody could smoke 3 packs a day and never get lung cancer.
Live till they're 90. I've seen it.
Right, yeah.
My great grandmother, she smoked till she was like 80 or 75 and she decided to quit. And she was like,
oh my gosh,
smoking like 2 packs of Lucky Strikes too. So
wow.
she was old school.
Wow.
So, she probably would have smoked, but till the day she died, but she quit. And it's funny because genetics play a huge factor in that. Absolutely.
They do. Yeah. Some of us will get out of this unscathed, but I'm not willing to take the risk. And I certainly what I'm most concerned about, honestly, is children that are being born today that are going to be growing with it in all of their development phases. They're going to be exposed to this and never get a reprieve. And they're going to be with it all their life.
And they're exposed to it a lot more because kids aren't outside as much as they used to be. Like for me, I try and get my son outside playing as much as possible. And it's like, stay outside. If he says, Daddy, I want to go to a playground, I'm like, okay, fine. It might be, I just get home from work and he's like, I want to go to a playground. Okay, fine. Because I know being outside, he's not exposed to, like you said, a lot of those toxins that are within the house.
It's just as healthy for you.
Yeah, I know, right?
Right, yeah.
Like if he's the motivation, that's great, but it's just as healthy for...
Well, if you're on your phone, like I usually am, so you kind of negate it.
Yeah, well, that's a problem.
Yeah. But I think like even in schools now, like devices that they use in the States. I mean, like kids don't get books anymore. Everything is done. Yeah. iPads, electronics, all the learning devices. So I can't even imagine in a classroom now, the amount of frequency they're absorbing.
That really terrifies me. Every single room has a Wi-Fi router. They all have iPads. They all have phones. They all have Fitbits. They all have earbuds. I mean, I can't even believe. And it's interesting because I've talked to many teachers who have not really been aware of this topic. And they say, well, that's really interesting because over the course of the last 5 years, I have noticed a dramatic change in children's behavior, across the board. And I'm like, well, yeah, I get it. And not only from the EMF, but because they're not going outside as much, they're not playing like they used to. Instead of recess, they're on their phones. They're not running around. They're not communicating. They're not using their imagination. I mean, so many reasons it's affecting them.
It's a huge, huge takeaway, I think, for people to kind of reassess. What's happening. I mean, you can't take your kid out of the classroom and out of the environment, but then what control, like you said, do you have? And it's once they get home, what kind of an impact can you have?
There are actually a lot of school districts around the world, really, that are starting to reevaluate their Wi-Fi situation. A lot of schools are going back to hardwiring. This is mostly happening in Europe, but I've seen some schools in California going that direction. They're not allowing wireless devices like phones in the classroom. So there's some awareness about it. But yeah, if you can control just the home environment, especially when you're sleeping, that's going to be majorly impactful, majorly helpful.
You mentioned a second Fitbits as well. And so can you talk a little, I've had a couple of clients that have had reactions on their skin from wearing things like that. So not doing that anymore. I've been trying to get my boyfriend to sleep without his.
Dude, yes,
and he sleeps much better without it when he does.
What about airplane mode? I usually throw mine on airplane mode.
For the Fitbit?
For the Fitbit or the Apple Watch. If I don't need to connect to the phone for my data, I'll connect during the day at certain points or whatever, but usually I keep it on airplane mode.
That should definitely help. I haven't tested a Fitbit in airplane mode to verify whether the signal is really gone, because a lot of this stuff you put in airplane mode, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Bluetooth's not still checking in or whatever. If you have airplane mode, I would absolutely do it. Like the Oura Ring, I have an Oura Ring and I know that you can put that 100% in airplane mode, and I've tested it and there is no signal. So I don't know about the Fitbits. A lot of these things, they're really tricky and they're still sending a signal even you think you've disabled it. You have a better chance of disabling that signal in airplane mode than otherwise. But I'd probably like to get a meter on there and verify. But if you have the option, I would definitely do it.
It's interesting. This is just nice science to back up. I think of I talk to people about, getting the messages on their Apple Watch or on their Fitbits and things do you really need that?
I know. Well, that's
just from a mindfulness, aspect of just, let's control the amount of stress that gets put on you in a day. But it's great now that there's some science to back it up to be listen, it's not just airy-fairy mental stuff I'm talking about. This is actually real, that it can have an impact when it's just on you all the time.
So how would this affect athletes and, everyday avid gym goers? I mean, Meg preaches this all the time on the show. Ever since I've known you, Meg, you're awesome, dude, when it comes to this stuff and getting people to actually practice it. But how does it affect the everyday gym goer and, possibly their recovery?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to that oxidative stress. So we know that exercise is going to have some oxidative stress in the body. And that's not entirely bad because it's a hormetic stressor and that's a good thing. But it's a different reaction. These non-native EMFs, when we're trying to recover and we're trying to perform well, and we've got this extra oxidative stress happening, it's not allowing us to perform at our best. And, a lot of your listeners probably do CrossFit, and I think that's awesome, especially, in a lot of CrossFit gyms, you'll have the doors wide open and you're getting a lot of fresh air. You're going outside sometimes. And that's completely different than any standard gym that you're going into where there's no fresh air. It's cinder block and you've got Wi-Fi routers everywhere. All of your machines. Yeah. I mean, I stopped going to the gym 10 years ago because I couldn't even find a machine to get on that didn't have a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And so you've got, 50 machines that are all sending out a signal. Everybody's phone, everybody's Fitbit. It's it is off the charts. So if you're going into any standard gym, maybe you're only going in there for 30 minutes or an hour, but why not go outside? Why not do CrossFit where you don't have to get on a machine? I just exercise primarily outdoors now for all of the reasons that we're talking about. The light exposure, less stress, more, fresh air, mental clarity. So it's affecting athletes and gym goers just like everybody else, but I think we're actually getting a little bit more of a hit from it.
Mm-hmm. So let's seasonally, I guess with that, I live in Minnesota, winters are brutal. Maddie is in Kuwait where summers are brutal,
right.
So those timings of in Idaho as well, you get seasons, at times, what do you do, I guess, for earthing and grounding in a time where it's maybe more difficult during the seasons or for working out outside, or what are some of the steps that you help people keep that up year round?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, well, the first thing I typically tell people is don't be afraid of extreme heat or extreme cold within reason. I mean, cold thermogenesis and heat shock proteins, I mean, these are good things. We don't want to be at a comfortable 70 degrees year round, right? We need these extreme exposures for so many health reasons. And for circadian rhythm too, we need to know what time of day it is, what time of year it is. I used to live in Alaska for 6 years, and I would still go outside and exercise in the middle of winter. If it got below, negative 30, of course, that's not happening. But I mean, most of the year, you can still get outside to some degree. And if you're uncomfortable for 30 minutes, I encourage people to do that. Mm-hmm. As far as the grounding goes, that's a really tricky topic because grounding in and of itself these days is not necessarily always a good thing. Because, for example, here in the US, we send current through the ground back to the substations. Okay. So our ground is not the Schumann resonance as it used to be because we've got this current going through the earth. This is a topic where different experts will kind of disagree and say you should do it anyway. And other experts say, no way, you're putting yourself into contact with that current and that's not a good idea. So
I suppose location would matter, getting outside of the city, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. Generally, but it's tricky. Every place is different. I mean, if you're on the beach, typically I'm saying on the beach, absolutely bury your whole body in the sand. It's awesome. If you're out in the country, you typically are going to have a better response, but there's still high tension power lines and, there's still infrastructure out into the rural areas a lot of times. At the end of the day, we say, try it and see how you feel. If you feel worse, don't do it. If you feel better, awesome, because everybody's different on this. And some people in the same neighborhoods will say, well, I feel way better when I ground. And their neighbor will say, well, I feel much worse. So it's just kind of a trial and error thing.
When you talk about the feeling, what is the feeling? How would you best describe that feeling? Like some people will say, oh, is it tired? Well, I'm tired all the time. Or, I'm tired because of work or whatever. So what could best describe that feeling so our listeners kind of have an idea of, okay, well, maybe I'm overexposed, so I need to look at my surroundings a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Good question. Well, it's different for everybody, unfortunately. So I have clients that will go into a room and they will know immediately. They'll start to get pressure. They'll start to get like a cortisol surge. They'll get headaches. I mean, they know immediately when they walk into the room. And it's just kind of, they explain it as just kind of this, like they feel like the air is gone, like they're suffocating.
Tight and tense.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not that sensitive. I can't go into a room and tell you whether there's something on or not. But the symptoms I get, when I used to work on my computer, on my lap, I would have my laptop on my legs and I'd be working on Wi-Fi. And it would take me about 20 minutes before I would just get so stinking irritable. I mean, I just wanted to jump out of my skin and strangle somebody. Just cranky. And it wasn't another 10 years after that experience of how I used to work on the computer that I put that together. I was like, oh, it was the EMF exposure and all of the, magnetic field from my computer. So irritability, the most common symptoms that I see from people, irritability, insomnia, tinnitus, anxiety, depression, headaches. Those are the big ones. But, again, everybody's presentation is going to be a little bit different. But if you have any of those that you just can't figure out, I would definitely look into this.
Is that so as a building block, because you're a nutritionist as well? I mean, you've got a background in a lot of different areas of health. So is nutrition still kind of the foundation you try to sort out first, or is it EMF that you look to first, or what's kind of the building block of process of elimination, I guess, because, anxiety, depression, irritability, all these things you're mentioning, I'm thinking food intolerances, lack of movement, lack of healthy relationships. I can walk into a room and feel really irritable too, based on, who's in that room and the energy they give off, so what are some of the building blocks, I guess, or process of elimination?
Yeah, that makes it really challenging because we have so many things that are causing similar symptoms. Gosh, it's so hard. I mean, everybody again is going to be different. If I take wheat out of my diet, that might have a much more profound impact than the EMF exposure for somebody else. So, I've got clients I'm thinking about, one in particular who a lot of her symptoms, I mean, really the majority of her symptoms, and I'm talking like headaches and migraines, were coming from her EMF exposure, and she eats like crap. Keep telling her, I'm like, well, we got to look at your diet, but she's not willing to change that. Okay. But when she changed her EMF, the EMF exposure she was getting, it pretty much stopped her headaches. But if you've got someone who's gluten and dairy intolerant and they keep eating it and they've cleaned up their EMF environment, they're still going to have those symptoms. Yeah. So really, we got to address all of the aspects, unfortunately. Right. If we want to kick ass and be awesome and perform well, we have to eat right. We got to have movement and we got to manage our environment.
Well, and I think you said it basically like, you can look at it right now, like, what are you willing to work with right now? And if food is, something that you're willing to play with and go for, then start there. If the EMF is something you're like, great, I can handle this versus changing my diet right now, I'll start there. Or, great, if getting outside for a walk is what I can commit to right now, I'll start there.
Right. Exactly.
So I think that's helpful to know that, it's all going to play a part. What about like any supplements or things though? I mean, on the topic of nutrition, things that can help offset maybe some of those exposure from EMF?
For sure. So there are some really helpful supplements. And I will say that the earlier question about who does this affect, people with chronic conditions, people with Lyme or heavy metal exposure, autoimmune issues, they typically are going to experience more impact from this because their bucket's already full, right? They already have so many stressors on their body, and adding one more via these EMFs just kind of can tip them over. Doing the work of chelating those heavy metals or addressing the Lyme or your hormone balance, getting these things back into balance can help a lot with symptoms. And then additionally, if you wanted to add some supplements in there, well, antioxidants are obviously going to be really important because we're helping to combat that oxidative stress that's happening. Some of the really great ones would be like rosemary. Rosemary tincture can be really awesome. Things like glutathione or that's going to support your liver and liver detoxification, and antioxidants are awesome. Are you guys familiar with the work of Dr. Jack Kruse? No? So he's a neurosurgeon, really popular in the US, talks everything cold thermogenesis and movement. And anyway, he's really, really big into EMFs, and he recommends astaxanthin a lot. Kind of an obscure supplement. You get it from like shellfish. Like if you ever eat shrimp, eat the tails. Honestly, I eat the tails. They're really, really high in astaxanthin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's awesome. And keratin and all these other omega-3s. What else? There's coriander, there's propolis. There's a couple French supplements like carbon 60. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one. Carbon 60 and what else? Just, polyphenols from vegetables like cocoa and green tea. And
So it's funny, we say supplements, and I think a lot of people think of like taking a pill or a powder or something, but what it sounds like is a lot of these are just foods that you can.
Yeah, you can get them a lot of foods, but when I fly, so when you get on an airplane, you're getting one of the biggest hits you can possibly get. You're in a metal box, way high in the sky. Everybody's got their phone on, and there's a Wi-Fi router. It's so obnoxious. So when I fly, I kind of load up on these. I'll take some glutathione. I take my rosemary tincture. I take some astaxanthin. I just load up because flights can be really tough for people.
That's
really
so
tough.
Funny because I feel like, I don't know, I think of one of the things that just totally brings me up and makes me really happy. And it's like, there's nothing glamorous about airport travel or anything, but like taking off on a plane, like I love travel, and it's probably the excitement of wherever I'm going, but like I can sleep on a plane, no problem. I don't mind it at all, but that's really funny to hear about that. That probably is like the worst, but I always feel like shit after. So that's probably, when I land, I'm like, but like the process of getting on it and just, the flight, like I get very excited about that. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, it's super exciting to take off because you're like, what's next? This is a great adventure. But I don't even go through the TSA scanner. I just asked for a pat-down. Yep. And they do it. No problem. It's never been a problem. I know people are like, well, you're going up into a plane in the sky. Like, isn't that exposure way worse? It's like, yeah, but in building biology, we say any reduction is worth it.
It's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Moving the bed away from the walls was one, hardwiring is going to be better. Avoiding the TSA scanner is another one, not sleeping with your phones or watches or things on you or in the room. Are there any other kind of things to think about? for?
Yes, I just like to challenge people in their cell phone use, and not just for the EMF exposure, but like you're saying, that constant stimuli. People have a really difficult time with this, but phone addiction is a very real thing, right? That dopamine rush from those pings that you're getting, that you got a message. I challenge people to ask themselves, are you happier the more you're on your phone? Or, how do you feel if you put that down, turn it off, go outside, play with your kids a little bit more, even, watch your favorite show, whatever it is. I think that a lot of us could really benefit from disconnecting more. Even, I tell people once a month, have a totally tech-free night. You turn off the electricity in the house, no devices, no screens, no computers. You light candles, you play a board game, you talk to your family, whatever. Those nights people report to me that they have such awesome experiences.
Yeah.
Those nights, just because they're connecting with their family, they're doing something kind of outside the box. They're not looking at their phone every 5 minutes. Really, really awesome stress reliever. You can be creative and use your mind. And so, just challenging people to kind of disconnect a little more and evaluate how connected they are. Because we shouldn't be on call 24/7, right? And we feel like we have to be these days.
So you brought up a good point too, with the whole, switching everything off at night. And I've always wanted to try this, and I just got to talk my wife into it. Switching off the lights and starting to use candlelight at night for the blue light, that stuff, just because circadian rhythm and everything. I mean, for thousands and thousands of years, that's how we lived. All of a sudden, we've introduced all the stimuli at night. So could you say, like, when people do that and they have a tech-free night, they experience better sleep and everything, could that just be a combination of everything, of the blue light, the EMF signals and all of that? And what's your stance on blue light?
I am a huge advocate of blocking blue light. In fact, that was when my sleep got so severe and I started blocking blue light, it was the beginning of my recovery from decade-long bout with insomnia. So I've got probably 5 or 6 pairs of different kinds of blue light blocking glasses. And I've got one in my car, one in my purse, 3 in my house. I mean, I won't go anywhere without them because it's so massively impactful. And if I'm out in the evening and I don't have my glasses on, I probably won't sleep that night, or it'll take me 3 or 4 hours to fall asleep. I mean, it's so dramatic for me. And, I know not everybody's quite that severe, but across the board, I mean, everyone that I have referred glasses to or minimizing their exposure, I haven't had anyone say that it didn't impact them. I mean, every single person who does this has said, wow, I didn't realize that my sleep was as poor as it was until I started to block this blue light. So candlelight, I think, is awesome. The light spectrum in candles is much different than our artificial light bulbs. And so we can see the candlelight at night and it's not going to impact our circadian rhythm. It's not going to suppress melatonin like the artificial overhead lights will, because it's a completely different spectrum. And we're supposed to see candlelight at night. We're supposed to see fire at night because, that's how we evolved, having fires in the evenings. I think it's major. And not only that, but mitochondria health, just central nervous system response, and just the kind of general feeling that you get, the ambiance of it, right? Totally different. It totally changes your mood. I mean, I see people's mood change and they don't even realize it. So much, much less stressful. And if you're avoiding blue light, you're probably avoiding your computers and your phones at the same time.
Well, I was just going to say with technology now, so on the phone, you can choose the red light at night on your phone. You can dim some of those. You can do the dark mode and things like that. Is that something that's helping? Or are they just kind of tricking us into thinking that it's okay and still feeding the addiction? Or is it are they doing a good job? Or what, I guess
Yeah. If you're going to use your phone at night, absolutely have
put
it
on
night
those
mode.
modes.
Yeah. I mean, so these are all blue light I consider an EMF. Light is an EMF. So again, any reduction is better than none. Okay. So if you're gonna use your phone and you are blocking the blue light, good, great. Okay. At least.
So utilizing those features is better than nothing. Yeah.
For sure.
So do you do anything online? How can people, reach out to you? I mean, we live in one of the most polluted countries in the world. So you might.
I would love for you to take your little device around Kuwait.
My God. You wouldn't come to Kuwait. You'd stay here for a day and you'd run back to the plane.
Yeah.
Send someone else to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine. Sure. Yeah. So sleep is my specialty. I got into nutrition and building biology because I was having my own sleep issues for over 10 years, 15 years. And I had to figure it out myself. Like you guys have talked about a lot on the show, the conventional medicine model doesn't always help these situations. Our doctors don't know about EMFs and air quality. I'm in the process of developing a sleep course, an online sleep course. It's titled The Sleep Easy Method. And I'm probably going to launch it sometime in February or March. And it goes through 8 modules, a lot of what we've talked about: circadian rhythm, blood sugar balancing, hormone response, psychological stressors. But I have one whole module specifically on EMFs. And I mean, that module alone is worth the whole program because I break it down piece by piece and tell people exactly how to go through their homes and mitigate their exposure and all the different steps they can take, from hardwiring completely, or if it's just turning the Wi-Fi off at night, putting you can put a timer on your Wi-Fi router so it goes off at 10 every night and comes on at 6 a.m. or whatever you want it to be. So that entire module goes step by step in helping people to mitigate. And then if people want to go a little deeper, I recommend they buy a meter like we talked about earlier. And this is best done in person. You have a building biologist come to your house, clearly identify what fields you're exposed to and help you remediate. But if that's not an option and somebody can purchase a meter, then we can do something like over Skype or Zoom and just kind of walk you through it and help you find your exposure and then the mitigation strategies to reduce it.
Amazing.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome. I'd love to bring you back on before you launch the course and kind of give our listeners like a synopsis of the course in case they wanted to take it. I mean, I know we have a lot of athletes that listen to our show. We have a good mix of athletes and non-athletes, easy gym goers, and people that like psychology, apparently. So, I mean, it would be awesome if you'd come back on and talk about sleep a little bit and sort of introduce that course, and a couple of people will sign up for it. I know in Kuwait, we're like, what, Meg, you'd say 5 years, 10 years behind on this stuff?
I'd say, 5 for sure. Yeah. And especially in health and fitness, I would say. I mean, yeah. It's frustrating.
Well, I would say, I mean, across the board though, I mean, talk to people every day here that have never heard of blue light before and have no idea. It's like, it's where we put our attention. And if we're not interested in learning, we're not going to learn.
Yeah, no, that's true. Absolutely. It's 100%. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was really fun. I'm happy to have the conversation with you.
Yeah, it was great to learn more. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, totally freaked me out, by the way. Like, I just I'm just like, oh man, I'm done.
I'm going to go walk to the grocery store now, and I'm probably going to leave my phone at home. I'll have to handwrite my list.
You don't do that? I'm like, I always handwrite my list.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. You can also find us on Instagram at The Project Kuwait. Thank you, and join us next time.